2022 is almost over now, so it's time for some retrospection. Whether we want to admit it or not, gaming is in a pretty good place at the moment. Sure, there have been a couple of hiccups here and there, but that hasn't stopped us from continuing along our gaming journeys, now has it? From the newer releases of this decade like Noita or Deep Rock Galactic to the certified classics such as Bayonetta and Terraria, I have had an absolute blast going from one entry to the next, and it's been a wonderful experience simply trying out new games, something little me rarely had the chance to do during his childhood. However, despite all the fun I'm having with expanding the horizons of my library, I almost always happen to find myself coming back to a small, special collection of games at the end of the day. They say variety is the spice of life, and as an enjoyer of some good chicken vindaloo, mapo tofu, and hot wings, why is it that, say, Team Fortress 2, a game 3 years away from being at the age of consent and adulthood, somehow manages to drag me back from the clutches of my entire modern games library and, dare I say, all the games I've played in my life thus far? Why is it that a game like ULTRAKILL can triple the playtime of CSGO, the former being a game I've owned for just a year, and the latter of which has been with me for over half a decade? Well, there are a lot of reasons we could put forth to describe how things have come to be, and some answers may seem more obvious or conclusive than others at first. From one angle, you could say that it's simply my taste in video game genres, and that is quite applicable to a certain degree. I'm quite a big fan of shooters, as you might have already guessed, and the movement FPS genre is a particular favorite of mine, cause yeah. I'm a movement player, Lois. Yet, I never stick to a single game genre, and I'd like to put forth the fact that Lethal League Blaze is a title which I play more often than 90% of the shooters I own, including real gems such as Dusk, Neon White, and Post Void. For those not in the know, Lethal League is, at its core, a dodgeball fighting game hybrid. This blazing fast game will always remain in my top 5 tier list, and I urge you to give it a try with some mates if you haven't done so already. It's got the gameplay, it's got the waifus, it's got the funky fresh beats, but most importantly, it is literally a whole different ballgame compared to any fighters or sports series out there, never mind the shooters I just mentioned. I already urged you once, but I'll urge you again just in case. Please, try some Lethal League. Small tangent aside, you could also say that it's a matter of the most played games being the better ones of their respective genres, which I have to firmly disagree with. For instance, I enjoy Overwatch as much as I do Paladins, in more ways than one, but one look at my cybergrind runs in ULTRAKILL should be more than enough to tell you which of the two I come back to more. Nonetheless, the decision never rode on the idea of this hero shooter is better than that one. Although both games are so my type, they tickle my fancy in fairly different ways. The thing is, it just so happens that Paladins tends to satisfy me in ways I'm really into. Yeah, boy. Moving on, the factor which actually determines whether any of us will come back to a game frequently or not is both quite basic at a first glance, and yet very complex when we dive deeper into the matter. Essentially, all we really need is a motivation to keep playing. This sounds pretty self-explanatory, doesn't it? All the actions we take in life are governed by whether we have a reason to do it or not, never mind choosing which video games to play for the next few hours. However, as is per usual with these kinds of things, there's always a little bit more beneath the surface, a little bit more to talk about. Through the lens of some basic psychology, I'll make an attempt to potentially describe what this little bit could be. Quick disclaimer, I am not a psychologist, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. Yeah, I've done my research, but this video should not act as your research. Consider all this as a discussion rather than a lecture. So with that covered, let's have a go at finding out how our favorite games keep us coming back for more. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's go through a quick rundown of what motivation actually entails. I'm well aware everyone here understands that it's the definition of why you are doing something. A lot of the time in psych, however, these whys will be categorized into either of two groups. On one hand, you might do something because of your own desire to achieve some internal sense of satisfaction one way or another. As a clear example, many of us exercise and work out since we strive for physical self-improvement and find joy in knowing that we're taking good care of our bodies. This is known as intrinsic motivation, since it's coming from within you. On the other hand, you might do something because of factors outside of yourself. Quite a few of us are familiar with the scenario of doing chores for our neighbors to earn a bit of pocket change, or perhaps taking out the trash in time to avoid getting harassed by mom and dad. This is known as extrinsic motivation, since it's coming from an external source. With this information in mind, let's actually apply it to the topic for today. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about my first 100 hours with a game everyone should know about: Doom Eternal. One good look at this game should be more than enough to immediately imbue many of us with a new intrinsic motivation to satisfy a murderous power fantasy we didn't know we had until our fateful encounter with the franchise. Through my journey in the base campaign spent brutally tearing apart demons, getting a grasp on the mechanics, and watching the Doom guy instill fear and respect in everyone he meets via your actions, I'm glad to say with complete honesty that although I'll never be such a badass in real life, my ever-present hunger to be one was fed gratuitously through my computer monitor instead, and the countless glowing reviews for Doom Eternal should act as a pretty clear indicator that many others feel the same way. And yet, without noticing it, as I continued to enjoy my time with Doom Eternal, something was starting to change within me. No, it wasn't my stomach going from full to hungry after a 4-hour Saturday afternoon FPS session. At least that's not what I'm talking about right now. It was something more subtle, certainly more silent, and definitely more psychological. In 1973, psychologists Mark Lepper, David Green, and Richard Nisbet conducted a study on some nursery school children. Whenever free time arrived for the kids, they would observe the behaviors of what the children were doing for fun. Specifically, they took note of how often and how long the young, aspiring artists of the nursery would draw for. After some time, they were able to set an average for how long these kids would spend drawing and how many would be made. In order to avoid confusion, we can just refer to this as their baseline drawing behavior. Eventually, the psychologists would introduce something to one particular group of artists: promised rewards. Now, whenever these kids drew something, they would always be given a little good player ribbon as a reward for their efforts. That sounds quite lovely, doesn't it? Seemingly, it was. The drawing behavior of the kids skyrocketed, and they were churning out drawings almost as fast as Redditors posting AI-generated art. However, it was only a matter of time before Lepper and his gang would have to stop rewarding the children. Sorry kids, we've run out of ribbons, but hey, you're all still more than welcome to draw as much as you like. Well, as much as you like seemed to mean barely at all to them, as their drawing behavior didn't just drop down to the original baseline, it dipped much lower. This is the over-justification effect. Basically, the idea is that extrinsic motivation can end up replacing intrinsic motivation. These children, who were initially drawing out of an intrinsic desire, whether that be to express their imagination on paper or perhaps to level up at the skill, ended up drawing for an extrinsic motivation instead, that being a craving for some ribbons. As a result, when there were no more rewards, there was nothing left to feed that extrinsic motivation. Therefore, much if not all motivation was lost as a whole. As you might have already guessed, what happened to the kids is basically what happened to me when playing Doom Eternal. See everyone, no matter what your initial desire was for playing a game, if you've played it for long enough, there's a very big chance that the reason you're still playing it has become heavily based on extrinsic motivation. This can come in many forms. For some of us, we want to see a game through to reach that final cutscene of our heroes coming out victorious, to watch those special end credits roll, and to see the title screen load up once more. For others, it may have initially been a matter of trying a game that's been recommended to them for ages, and so once they had their fill from its gameplay loop, they can tick it off from the backlog, something which seems to only ever be growing larger and larger. For those like myself who are looking to get a bit more out of their purchases, we might end up going for 100% completion. I personally won't do this for every single game I play, but I do find the motivation to do so more often than not with games I thoroughly and genuinely enjoyed. And no doubt about it, I thoroughly and genuinely enjoyed Doom Eternal. So it was only natural that the final level of completion for me was acing the base campaign's master levels. At first, I did in fact play them to continue fulfilling that Megadeth power fantasy I'd found Doom to serve so well. With the skills I gained from the regular campaign, it was time to seriously put myself to the test against some real challenges. The Super Gore Nest? Done and dusted. The Arc Complex? Easy peasy. The Mars Core? Real good stuff. What a swell experience you might glean from my adventures so far, but by the time Mars Core was over, it had already happened. Reaching Taraz Nabad simply brought the issue out into the open. Back then, Taraz Nabad was a completely different beast for me to conquer. So much so that I was no longer playing as the Chad Slayer, relishing the carnage I was creating. I was once again merely a sweaty gamer, replaying id Software's carefully curated but sadomasochistic experience over and over again. It eventually got to the point where a solid 60 or so hours of my playtime was consumed by Taraz Nabad. I subjected myself to this not because I wanted to be rewarded with a skin which I've never used to this day, or bragging rights that literally none of the people I know could care for. It really was as simple as wanting to see the words 10 out of 10 challenges on my screen. Worst of all, it just didn't hit the same anymore when replaying the other already completed master levels. What's the point of going back for some more Super Gore Nest if it's already done? And so that was it. That was the point where I decided I was done with Doom Eternal, where my journey was complete. Soon enough, other games were taking the limelight, and Doom Eternal sunk into the depths of my Steam library. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that Doom Eternal is a bad game because of this. It should be quite obvious to us that most games will inevitably reach a point which we consider our extrinsic motivations satiated, and it more than likely happened to you with your most recently shelved title, right? Well, what about the ones where that isn't the case? The games that try really hard to tell you, you're not done with us just yet. Take popular games like League of Legends and Fortnite for instance. Although the actual games themselves are really just 30 to 60 minute matches, not once will they let your external motivations run dry, simply due to the fact that you'll never see an end to the stream of motivators these games provide. Climbing the ranked leaderboard, leveling up battle passes, earning daily login rewards, grinding challenges for in-game currency, the list goes on and on. To put things into perspective, if some games drive your extrinsic motivations like a carrot dangling on a stick, games like Fortnite decide to present us with the entire goddamn farm instead. I guess that's it then. By attempting to forever fuel our extrinsic motivations, this is how some video games keep us coming back for more. Except, this video is supposed to be about how our favorite games keep us coming back for more. Is something like League of Legends really a game you could consider your favorite? If so, that's perfectly fine, I'm not one to judge. But from seeing how the most addicted League players feel about the game, my personal experience included, it's safe to say that it's not exactly favorite game material. Bear with me for a little longer, everyone. It's time for another story. ULTRAKILL is a game that I went into having the exact same intrinsic motivation that I had for playing Doom Eternal. I mean, the title ULTRAKILL is literally synonymous with super murder. We all know what we want from it. One way or another, ULTRAKILL was fulfilling my big die power fantasy just like Doom had. But oh no, we've got a problem. ULTRAKILL provides a whole chock full of things to feed the extrinsically motivated. B ranks rewarded to those who maximize how stylishly and speedily they slay every single enemy, finding secrets and hidden levels, a whole leaderboard dedicated to who can out ULTRAKILL who in an infinite wave game mode. Aaron, your menu screen is more golden than a bottle of Jarate. You've played through that fake dating sim, and you're in the top 20 on the violent cybergrind leaderboard. Yet, you're coming back for more. Why? Well, the answer to that is honestly really basic and makes a lot of sense if you think about it. See, the overjustification effect is all about how extrinsic motivation can take over intrinsic motivation. So what happens if that doesn't actually occur? The P ranks, the secrets, the cybergrind leaderboards, and of course, finishing the game itself. What if they never replaced my main intrinsic motivation to play ULTRAKILL, my desire to feel like a badass? And that, my friends, is where today's discussion has led up to. Remember the study I was talking about earlier, and how one particular group of kids were promised rewards? That's not the whole story. There was another group which experienced a similar condition. These children were also given good player ribbons for their drawings. The difference is, the rewards were never promised. In other words, they weren't a main concern. From the beginning of the study until the end, although these artists never saw a big jump in drawing behavior, they never saw any decreases either. External factors made no difference, and so external motivation was not necessary. So whenever it was free time for them, they would keep coming back for more. For any video game out there, external forms of influence will always be present in the experience. Even games such as Minecraft, a sandbox well known for its make-your-own-fun gameplay, can fuel extrinsic motivation through goals present, like defeating the Ender Dragon. But when a game manages to somehow keep your internal motivation burning bright enough, outshining any extrinsic motivations you might develop, external factors go from core components of the game's enjoyability to mere pleasant additions instead. Whenever I felt myself slowly slipping into the monotony of finding secrets to satisfy my completionist urges, ULTRAKILL would more often than not capitalize on the very fact that I would be caught lacking while doing so. Eventually, secrets weren't being found to fill in some boxes on the menu screen and were instead revisited due to the diversity they brought when replaying levels for fun. Whenever I reached a point where I was simply yeeting damage out as fast as possible during a boss fight to get that P rank, at the end of it, the game would taunt me and ask, why are you throwing bullets when you could be throwing hands? Eventually, boss fights weren't simple quick switch damage sponges getting in the way of my P ranks. They were proper one-on-one duels that, at their peaks, felt like an actual PvP match against a real person in a contest to see who could flex on who the best. Whenever I got a new personal best in the cybergrind, I would feel pretty good. But when I hit my first ever Christ back in the cybergrind, this is a bit dirty, but what? I wasn't cyber grinding anymore, I was cyber styling. Now we're cooking with fire. This is how our favorite games keep us coming back for more. Not so much the Bonaparte, except in cases where it is about being horny. Before we end things off, I'd like to make one thing very clear. The conclusions I've come up with today are indeed backed up with some psych research. This does not, however, mean anything I've said so far should be considered as an all-encompassing precedent. At the end of the day, our reception towards games will always be unique to every single one of us, despite the patterns we can analyze. In other words, the juggling of intrinsic and extrinsic motivations to play a game is entirely up to you when it comes down to it, despite what games may throw your way and everything I've just told you. Against the overwhelming odds, there are in fact people who still play League of Legends, not for the sake of hitting Challenger, but simply because they enjoy the skill expression of playing Katarina. Insane, right? On the other hand, a lot of people I know stopped playing ULTRAKILL well under the 20-hour mark simply because they were done with the game in the exact same way I was with Doom Eternal. Additionally, we can choose to stop or keep coming back to a game, but the decision to do so is not a static one. I've shelved Minecraft more times than I can count, for instance, and yet a random Minecraft video will appear in my YouTube recommended feed like a shiny Pokemon, and that's all it takes for me to wanna hop back in again, whether it's to revisit my old house or perhaps to build an entirely new one. On that positive note, I'd just like to thank you all for sticking to the end of this talk of mine. It really does mean a lot. I had a great time making this video, and I hope it shows through the somewhat mediocre script and editing. Since you guys are still here, why not leave a comment describing how your favorite games have kept you coming back for more? Or perhaps you could start a thread trashing the egregious practices of today's games and capitalizing on the ways our brains work. One way or another, I do hope to catch you all in the next video, whenever that's coming out. For now though, that will be all. Thanks once again for watching, have a lovely rest of your year, whether you're tuning into this at its start or end, and please, take care.
Don't stop, 'cause get up, got the beat, show shot. Get up quickly, you don't stop, 'cause the squad has got the beat, show shot.